If you wish to develop as a writer, you will have to also develop as a person. I would suggest that you will need to develop a moral standpoint, which will probably also entail a political standpoint. I am not saying that that should be a left-wing opinion, a right-wing opinion, or even my own personal preference, an anarchist opinion. The important thing is the understanding that you should have a platform, a moral or political platform from which you can look at the world and hopefully to understand it, which will need a certain amount of compassion and empathy, whereby you can look at someone who has ideas that are completely foreign to your own and yet perhaps understand why they have them, what the factors were in their background that caused them to have those ideas, perhaps to understand that you yourself, brought up in slightly different circumstances, may have had exactly those ideas. So that is the basis from which you can look at the world without necessarily being judgmental, but simply trying to understand it.
A little exercise that you can do for yourself is make 3 columns on a page. And in the first column, I want you to write down 2 or 3 shows that are successful and well-liked, but you personally do not like them or respond to them. You're not a fan, okay? It's very easy to write negatives about a show that everybody admits stinks, but there's gotta be shows out there that your friends don't understand why you don't like them and people don't know why you haven't watched them. But so you make the list of shows that are liked by many people, by friends, that you don't like. Try to find in that first column, okay, what are the similarities between those 3 shows as far as why you aren't responding to them. Because you'll know right then that if somebody said, why don't you write a show in this world or this genre or this tone that feels similar to that, that's not your voice, at least not now. The second column, I want you to write your version of how Veep is to me. Shows that you absolutely enjoy and think are great, but you can't imagine yourself in a million years being able to have written them. What are the similarities between those? And this is what's interesting about the second column. I would challenge you, if you ever return to your notebooks or return to these videos 10 years from now after you're a successful writer, take a shot at writing one of them. It's fun to kind of break out of your barriers and try something that you don't normally do, but don't do it right away. That's my only advice to you. And then the third column are your favorite shows, the ones that you eat, sleep, breathe, drink, all that stuff, the ones that you just can't get enough of, the ones that you can remember scenes line for line, the ones that made you think about doing this. And this is the most important part of this exercise. I want you to write down, even if you only pick 3 shows, but you can pick 4 or 5, all in that last column, I want you to write down 10 things that they have in common. And as you see this, especially if you stay general, you'll kind of find the world that your voice currently exists in.
Think of tone as the musical soundtrack to your book. What is the mood of it? Is it kind of gothic-y and dark? Is it a thriller and urgent and suspenseful? Is it lush and swooning and romantic? I found, for me, a tip that has worked really well has been to listen to music again and again, the same track often, throughout the process of writing a book. It helps me mentally maintain consistency of tone. I think tone is something that you have to think about from the very start. Is this going to be a light and frothy book? Is it going to be really dark? Because the thing that you need to hang on to is that clear picture, the consistency all the way through. You're going to have variations, obviously, because nobody wants to read something that is 100% one way. But it's really important that you keep in mind the kind of thing that you're writing. I'll give you an example. I wrote a book a few years ago called The Girl You Left Behind, and it's set in the First World War in a part of occupied France where people were starving. It was very bleak. The forests had been raided for firewood. Everything was grey and people were hungry, and it was a place almost without hope at that point. And so I listened to an album by John C. and Alex, a Scandinavian group called Rice Boy, which was very spare electronic acoustic music, which somehow gave me that environment of bleakness that I needed to work in. And the odd thing is, and I found this through talking to a lot of writers, when we're writing, we can often listen to the same track again and again and again without getting bored of it in the same way that you would if you weren't writing. You know, normally you can only listen to the same track a few times before you start to tire of it. If you're writing, it seems to activate a different part of your brain. So you may find that if you listen to a soundtrack, for example, and a lot of the streamers are very good at this, you can kind of pick a mood to listen to. In my most romantic book, The Last Letter from Your Lover, I used a film soundtrack. It was the film Jane Eyre by Cary Fukunaga. And I used the soundtrack by Dario Marianelli, which is lush strings. It's full of yearning and wishing and longing. It's a really romantic, wistful soundtrack. And I listen to that again and again and again. Sometimes I listen to this same piece of music on and off for a year. But what it does is it gives you that thread, that consistency of tone that runs the whole way through the book. Even if events within the book are changing, that's the mood. That's what you're trying to create, a consistent mood. I mean, obviously, you're going to vary within your book. It would be very bland if you had something that felt the same all the way through. But it's like everything. You're going to have moments where the plot speeds up and slows down. You're going to have variations in scale. All these things are going to happen. But it's like having a foundation that you keep returning to. As I said, especially if you're a first-time writer, it's often really hard to maintain that feeling. And it's almost like having a line that you can vary bits of the plot up and down through, but you still know that this is the tone you're going to return to again and again.
The perpetual conflict between accuracy and plausibility. Which is more important? Suppose you're reading a book and let's say you live far away and the book is set in London. And let's say the details supplied about London match your mental image of London based on everything that you have seen. Maybe you've been there a couple of times. You've certainly seen plenty of TV and movies that take place in London. You have read books that take place in London. And if what you're reading now fits that prior context, you think, yeah, this is a superbly researched book. But maybe it isn't, because as you know, if you do live in London or if you go there frequently, London is actually not like the world's image of it. The world's image of London is polite bobbies in pointed hats and red phone boxes and all that kind of thing, gentlemen with rolled up umbrellas and so on. That is the international public popular image of London. But if you go there, you know it's actually not like that anymore. There are not that many phone boxes anymore because everybody has a cell phone. The police no longer walk about in traditional uniforms with the pointed hat. They're often got flak jackets on, they're often carrying weapons, they're often in pairs. It's just not really the same as it was. But if you put that in a book and somebody far away reads it, they would think, well, this doesn't really sound like London because it doesn't match the received image of London. So you've got to tread very carefully between accuracy and plausibility. And in general, plausibility is better. And I've done that many times in my books. For instance, the fifth book I wrote, Echo Burning, takes place far in the west of Texas, very isolated, empty region. And there is no police department for each town. I mean, that would be ridiculous. It could be that the nearest police department is hundreds of miles away. And therefore, people tend to rely on what they call the state police or the highway patrol. So that's what I went into. The law enforcement involvement in that book is the highway patrol or the state police, which is a statewide organization that has jurisdiction everywhere. And I think that everybody in the world understands the idea of the highway patrol. They understand the state police. They've seen it on TV shows. They've seen it in movies. They get the concept. The problem was in Texas, the department is actually called something different. The department is called the Department of Public Safety. And I felt that that would not communicate. If somebody in another part of the world is reading that book and they hear about the Department of Public Safety, does that mean what it should mean to them or not? I think people in foreign countries would be scratching their head there, and they'd be thinking, Department of Public Safety, what is that? Restaurant inspectors or something? So in other words, in order to be plausible, I got less accurate. The accurate name is Department of Public Safety. The plausible name is Highway Patrol. And so that's what I used. And the rest of the world was totally satisfied with that. It gave them what they needed. It mapped it out correctly for them. They were happy. People in Texas were writing to me saying, you know, it's not called the Highway Patrol. And I'm like, yeah, I know that. But for the rest of the world, for the majority of readers, I had to be wrong in order to be right.